Breaking news at this hour, some conservative members of Congress officially introduced articles of impeachment against Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein on Wednesday. It's a move that's been threatened for weeks. Congressman Mark Meadows of North Carolina and Jim Jordan of Ohio introduced the articles. CBSN political contributor and Capitol Hill reporter for The Hill, Molly Hooper, joins me now on the phone. Molly, first of all, why now?
Well, why now? The House is about to go back home to their districts for, I'd say, about 4 to 5 weeks of recess. And really, this is the last time before they go home for such a long recess period that they can introduce this. And once the House actually comes back into session, really there's only going to be 9 legislative days that they're getting any business done in the House before the election.
So they've introduced it. Does this mean the House is actually going to vote on it?
Not necessarily. If Mark Meadows and Jim Jordan force the House to vote on something, the Speaker will likely have the House vote on sending the articles of impeachment to the Judiciary Committee, and what that would do is essentially bottle it up in the Judiciary Committee. It's not a popular vote that many people in the House would probably want to take, but again, it's not necessarily voting strictly on the articles of impeachment.
Molly, Face the Nation moderator Margaret Brennan asked South Carolina Congressman Trey Gowdy about this earlier this month. We want to play a clip of that. Let's listen.
Okay.
Are you going to sign on to this effort to impeach Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein that House Republicans are talking about putting forward this week?
No. For what? Impeaching for what? No.
Inappropriate.
I've had my differences with Rod Rosenstein. I talk to him quite often, privately, which again is a lot more constructive than the public hearings we have. He's a Trump appointee. So is Jeff Sessions. So is Chris Wray. If President Trump is dissatisfied with Rod Rosenstein, he can fire him with a tweet. But to impeach someone, I mean, no, I would not be. I'm not convinced there is a movement. I read about it in Politico, and sometimes their sources are better than mine. But I'm not part of that.
So there has been a lot of appetite from Republicans in Congress to impeach Rosenstein. What are you hearing at this point?
Well, at this point, it really is sort of restricted to a group of the so-called Freedom Caucus members led by Jim Jordan and Mark Meadows. Individuals who are aligned with President Trump, who are very upset with the way that the Justice Department handled the investigation into the Hillary Clinton email server situation. They're the ones who went after Peter Strzok at that fiery hearing 2 weeks ago. The FBI, the former head of counterintelligence at the FBI, who had all the text, the loaded text messages against President Trump with his then girlfriend at the FBI, fellow attorney Lisa Page. And so they've really got into it with these members of who had investigated the president, the now president, and also conducted the investigation into Hillary Clinton. And they say that the way that they carried out those investigations was not fair and it was not equitable and that there was bias associated with it. And when Rod Rosenstein came up before the Oversight and Judiciary Committee, Jim Jordan in particular really got into it with Rod Rosenstein, saying, basically accusing Rod Rosenstein of threatening staffers on the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee with calling them in as witnesses and whatnot. And so this has been a long simmering tension between two entities, and it's not necessarily restricted to the Republican Party as a whole.
Well, how are Democrats reacting?
Well, I can imagine, and I haven't seen the Democratic response yet, but we'll hear. This is crazy. It's just basically using what Trey Gowdy said. And again, he said something kind of similar earlier today before these articles of impeachment were introduced. What's the point of doing this? This guy, Rod Rosenstein, is a Trump appointee. Christopher Wray, Trump appointee. Jeff Sessions, Trump appointee. And, sort of the ostensible reason for these articles of impeachment is that the DOJ has not turned over some 880,000 pages of documents that the Oversight Committee has been demanding, when in reality, today they had a meeting, key members of the Oversight Committee and the Judiciary Committee had a meeting with key Justice Department officials in which, Trey Gowdy basically came out afterwards and said, we're really getting the documents we need. It's taking a little bit longer, but the effort is there. It's just when you're going through that many documents, it's hard to turn them all over at once. One of the resolved clauses, so to speak, in this articles of impeachment is that Rod Rosenstein is redacting too much of those documents that these individuals, that Jim Jordan and Mark Meadows say items that don't need to be redacted. So really, this is a conflict between two branches of government essentially. But again, if the goal is to get access to documents, and that was the main beef with Rod Rosenstein, you have somebody like Trey Gowdy, who is an attorney and going back to that profession, saying we are actually getting that information.
And Molly, as you mentioned, this is not that popular with some Republicans, and I imagine that the midterm elections are weighing on them. How would it affect some of them?
That's a great question, and here's why it's a great question. Because in Washington, D.C., in this Beltway bubble that's under lots of rain right now, maybe for good reason, we think that this is a huge deal, and it is. It's very important, when it comes to national security investigations. You got branches of government fighting each other. Okay, that's fine. But you talk to lawmakers, Republicans and Democrats, in districts, and they represent various parts of this country. You ask them, well, what are you hearing about Russia and these investigations at home? And they say, nothing. We're hearing about the economy. We're hearing about tariffs. We're hearing about trade. We're hearing about taxes. That's what we hear about. Less so, much less so, on the issue of Russia and collusion and witch hunts and things like that. I mean, and so that's why it's unclear how this will impact them when it comes to the midterm elections. But we'll see. We'll see.
All right. Again, some conservative members of Congress officially introduced articles of impeachment against Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein. Molly Hooper on the phone with us. Thank you so much.